Hi everyone, this is my presentation on water control and the ecological impacts of altering the flow of the Colorado River, done by Christina Hussey. For many years now, the very heavily developed Colorado River and its dams have become a high interest of mine. 11 years ago, when I was 21 years old, I was learning how to row my own boat. I heard many stories of preparation and hard work that it took to row down the Grand Canyon, and immediately I wanted to go there one day. A couple years later, I was invited to Lake Powell for a 2-week stay on the lake. It was an amazing, beautiful, and breathtaking place. To get to the dock, you have to go across the Glen Canyon Dam. It was absolutely huge, and I was in awe of how something so massive, holding back so much water, could have been built so many years ago. I took a tour of the dam at that time. And then, while on that trip, I sat for hours on a beach reading a book called Wet Desert. The plot was about destroying that dam and the Hoover Dam to let the Colorado River flow freely again. It described the damage to the ecosystems of the river and what the massive lakes had covered up. From that point on, I was hooked to know more and more information. This paper/presentation will inform you of what the river and ecosystem was like before the dams, how the Hoover Dam, Glen Canyon Dam, and the 13 other dams on the river have affected the river flow and ecosystem, and what the Colorado River Delta was like and is like today. Before the damming of the Colorado River, it would have looked like this here. The Colorado River is 1,450 miles of drains and is expansive. Its arid watershed encompasses parts of 7 U.S. states and 2 Mexican states and rises out of the central Rocky Mountains. It generally flows southwest across the Colorado Plateau, at times with massive amounts of Colorado runoff water, and then through the Grand Canyon and on into Mexico to the river delta. This river is known for its dramatic canyons, whitewater rapids, and specifically the Grand Canyon. About 2,000 to 1,000 years ago, the river would have sustained large agricultural civilizations, but these people collapsed probably because of drought, naturally. Then along came Europeans in the 16th century. The Colorado River Basin then became part of the U.S. in 1846. It would have looked much like it does today, except, very importantly, it was untamed and free to flow to the Gulf of California. In its natural state, the Colorado River used to pour 16.3 million acre-feet into the Gulf of California. The average flow would have been 22,500 cubic feet, but at times had reached hundreds of thousands CFS, and at its lowest times, only hundreds of CFS. Its flow was not at all steady and would have been a river of extremes like none other in the United States. The ecosystem of the Colorado River before the dams were put in would have been full of wildlife, aquatic vegetation, and lots of fish. Large amounts of sediment were carried down the river and made huge sandbars and beautiful sandy banks. Alpine plants grew in this region along with columbine flowers that bloom early in the spring. The Grand Canyon is home to many large animals such as elk, bear, mountain lions, coyotes, and bighorn sheep. The abundance of insects made great habitat for birds like the American dipper and many other songbirds. The river consisted of 49 native fish, 42 of which were endemic. The river is home for the bony tail, Colorado pike minnow, humpback chub, and razorback sucker, all 4 of which are endangered now. Since the damming of the Colorado River, was put into effect, there have been many negative consequences, and we will start by looking at the Hoover Dam. In 1922, with the support of the 31st President and 7 states, the Colorado Compact was formed. I should tell you that on the left 2 pictures, that is the Black Canyon prior to the dam, and the picture on the right is currently the Hoover Dam. The dam was built in 1931. To this day, it is known to be one of America's greatest engineering projects and is known all around the world. It holds back the 15,853,000 acre-feet of water that we call Lake Mead. It provides irrigation water and hydroelectric power to Nevada, Arizona, and California. It took 6 years to fill this lake up. During that time, virtually no water reached the mouth of the river, and this significantly changed the salinity of the river's delta. The delta has been reduced to only 5% of what it used to be. The Hoover Dam releases water from the lower half of the lake and has significantly changed the natural temperature of the river to a constant 50 degrees now. The temperature change is linked to the decline in the estuarine ecosystem and is to blame for many native plants and animals becoming extinct or no longer being able to sustain in that region. The natural flow of the river and its delivery of sediment has been stopped and now gets trapped behind the dam, taking away or affecting almost all of the natural sandbars and islands below that was home to many plants and animals. The Glen Canyon Dam came along in 1963, creating more negative effects on the Colorado River. It holds back the water of the river, creating Lake Powell. Because of its location in the desert, Lake Powell causes huge evaporation of the river water. It is estimated that 860,000 acre-feet of water is lost through evaporation in Lake Powell every year. That's a lot of water, folks. A lot. Roughly 1 million tons of silt is trapped behind the Glen Canyon Dam yearly. This caused huge ecological effects between the Glen Canyon Dam and the Hoover Dam. The river can no longer deliver the silt that once created natural sandbars and islands and is now very rapidly eroding. Floods that used to yearly scour the river and its banks are now trapped behind the dam and has allowed vegetation to encroach, causing great changes to the riparian zone. We lost an entire narrow and steep-sided canyon, Glen Canyon, under Lake Powell. And finally, the Glen Canyon Dam, like the Hoover Dam, releases water from hundreds of feet below the surface of Lake Powell, and the average temperature is now 47 degrees. Pre-dam, the average temps of the river could range from 80 degrees in the summer to just above 32 degrees in the winter. This has had a lasting effect on native plants, fish, mammals, and the people who have visited the river. Lastly, I'd like to talk to you about the river's delta, what it was like before the dams and what it is like after the dams. On the left, you will see before, in the middle, sort of currently, very dried up, hardly any water reaching there, and then there's an after picture, probably not too long after the dams were built. The Colorado is the most sediment-rich river in the United States. The flow of this sediment once transported the essential nutrients to all of the river, the delta, and the ocean. Because of how sediment-rich the Colorado River is, it created a vast delta with its silt deposits. It used to cover 1,930,000 acres and supported a large population of plants, birds, and aquatic life. Pre-dams, the river's delta was a critical stopover point for migrating bird species. In the winter, it was a permanent home for many species of water birds. Local communities of Mexico relied on the rich natural resources of the delta provided. Today, the delta is completely dried up. It currently stops flowing just a few miles into Mexico. Recently, there was a short experiment done using a pulse flow to help restore the ecosystem in the area of the delta. It's wonderful to see the conservationists working toward getting water to flow back to the sea and restore the ecosystem of the delta, but it is just one small experiment. In conclusion, I want to speak a little more about why I chose this topic. In Module 5, we did 2 experiments, the carbon footprint and sustainability experiment and the seawater and freshwater experiment. During both of those experiments, I was always led back to think about the Colorado River and what we as humans have done to it in order to grow the human species. In the first experiment, carbon footprint and sustainability, I thought about the documentary of that family who chose to have 0 carbon footprint for a year. How, if all of us live this way from the beginning, might our most prized possession of the West look like today? Would we really need all that water? Maybe it was really just a thought. Then we did the seawater and freshwater experiment, and I was reminded of this documentary I watched about the Earth being one closed system that works as a whole. What is happening on one side of the Earth can be linked to an effect of what is happening on another part of our planet. I strongly recommend you watching this video. It's on YouTube, and it's a PBS video called Nova, Earth from Space. It's a beautiful, beautiful video. I mentioned in my introduction that I whitewater raft. I really did learn this sport so that I could be closer to nature, and yet within the last several years, my thoughts have changed more toward conservation instead of consuming our resources. So, while I believe that rowing my boat on the Arkansas that gets to have its seasonal runoff is okay, and mind you, I am aware that we have dams on this river, Twin Lakes, hello, but I feel it is less developed and still gets to have its natural ebbs and flows for the majority. So while I feel like I can use the Arkansas, I no longer see it fit for myself and my beliefs to use the Colorado River in any way from this point on. It is already heavily, heavily used by others. I no longer desire to row down the rapids of the Grand Canyon. What it once was is what I would like to see it as. That's what I want to row down. I want to park my boat on a sandbar and watch the waters rise during the runoff. I want to be able to say that we as people did what was right for our planet and our river. Now, while this paper has talked about has talked about the negative impacts on the Colorado River, I understand that there are also positives that we can speak about and be proud of. Millions of families have had their vacation times bonding and being a unit on Lake Mead or Lake Powell or Lake Havasu or down the Grand Canyon. Many people agree that the Glen Canyon Dam was one of America's most regretted environmental mistakes. Someone said this, David Brown, long ago, who was head of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club is an environmental organization in the United States founded in 1892. I cannot imagine what the Sierra Club's crusaders of the 1960s were looking at in the Grand Canyon,